We are jumping into Matthew today. Last week we looked at the first 5 verses of John. Check that out if you missed it. This episode is going to be a little shorter, but you've got Mother's Day stuff to do anyways, so you don't have time for this. But if you do, welcome. Today we are covering Jesus' genealogy. Based on your perspective, this could be one of the most boring or one of the most exciting parts of the Bible. I think it's super dope. I was debating reading this section in its whole, but I figured let's get to the good parts and not drone on about all the names, which does not mean they're meaningless. I hope that you all can grasp by the end of this episode as to how cool this is. We can trace Jesus' lineage all the way back to Adam, as in Adam and Eve. Now that's actually not mentioned in Matthew because I'm also pulling scripture from Luke 3:23. So there's two genealogies mentioned, and if I miss a certain person in this episode, then I can just cover it again when I get to Luke 3, so it's a win-win. So let's begin. So we start off with Adam. Adam is often referred to as the son of God. Then 8 generations later, we've got Noah. Now it would be pretty hard for Jesus to not be related to Noah, so that one's easy. 10 generations after that, we have Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. And here are our first prophecies of the series. So these 3 men are referred to as the patriarchs of Judaism. And the Bible mentions in a lot of places that Jesus will come from this patriarch. I will just read this passage from Numbers 24:17. So context, this was written by Moses, who we think died around 1272 BC, and obviously Jesus was born long after that because he was alive during the first years of AD. So this prophecy was fulfilled over 1,000 years later. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise out of Israel. But it gets better, because Jacob has many sons, and one of them is Judah. And I'm about to read from Genesis 49, where Jacob is telling his sons what God has told him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of nations shall be his. So the verses clearly connect, even though they're from different books, because a descendant of all these guys will have a scepter, which is a staff carried by rulers. Now let's go down the line. We get to Salmon and Rahab, who had Boaz, who had Obed, who had Jesse, who had David, King David. Israel's second greatest king, the greatest being, of course, the reason for the season. But let's jump into another prophecy in 2 Samuel 7:12. This is God speaking to David. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Forever. That's a strong word, and it could probably only refer to one person. But next on the list, we have Solomon and other kings, and then they were still keeping track even when they went to Babylonian exile. Looks like Jeconiah was the one that was captured, but it keeps going. Then they eventually leave Babylon. Keeps going into the Roman occupation, which leads us to Joseph and Mary, and that's where we're going to start next week. But here's the main takeaway from this. The ancestors of Jesus, who is the Messiah, God himself, enter other names of Jesus here, his ancestors kind of sucked. It's true, just read Genesis all the way through 2 Kings. We've got some flawed people here. Story after story. Like Adam and Eve were the very first people to do bad stuff. The OG sinners. Noah got drunk at one point. Abraham slept with someone other than his wife. Isaac and Jacob got problems coming out the wazoo. Judah, he's the mean brother from that VeggieTales episode.
It's time to get what you've got coming to you.
King David, I said that he was one of the greatest kings of Israel, which is true and sad because he was messed up too. But this is actually good news. You know why? Because it still worked. You still got to Jesus. Rahab, she was a prostitute. Jesus, the purest person to ever walk the earth, was a descendant of a prostitute. What does this mean? It means that God can work through all of us. If God can bring the Messiah out of a prostitute, I think he can do a lot more with prostitutes and politicians and other people we consider to be lower than low. I hope that this can encourage some and also teach others to not hate those people, but to show them the correct path. We're all flawed, and that's not technically okay, but Jesus came so that the issue wasn't about being flawed. It was just about being a follower. Thanks, guys.